Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, so this evening will be a continuation from last night, which was questions and answers on Ajahn Chah's life and teaching. Yesterday was the birth or anniversary of Ajahn Chah's birth, and originally that was I was going to have a session last night with a Q&A, and I'd give a Dhamma talk tonight, but Ajahn Yanarato put out some sheets for people to write down questions, and there was a lot of questions, so I couldn't get through all of them last night. So we'll continue this evening, since it seemed like a fruitful session last night, and anyway, I enjoyed it. It's nice to be kind of stimulated to recollect on about Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Chah's life. Just thinking about it, because oftentimes, I don't really think about it that much. I mean, it's just this sort of steeped in it, and then being having the opportunity to have questions, and then thinking about it, then just remembering various aspects of his life and teaching that were so meaningful to me, because it was incredibly meaningful to me. It was over 50 years ago, meeting Ajahn Chah, and my life completely changed. And I had what I thought was a trajectory for my life. Actually, I didn't have any plan what my life was, but Ajahn Chah was able to stimulate a wish and a commitment to training. I think that's one of the great gifts of Ajahn Chah, was his ability to inspire people to be willing to commit to practice, to training, to giving selves to a spiritual life, a holy life, and not just as monastics, but as lay people as well. He had, he did inspire a very large sangha of monastics, both monks and nuns, but he also, really inspired a very large lay community to take the Buddhist teachings really seriously, and give themselves to it. And I think just the power of his example was one of the main things, because it was evident that he had given himself completely to the Buddhist teachings, to the Buddhist training, and he had been transformed by it. That was something that I remember just a year or two ago. My mother had. I was talking to her, and she was saying, "Oh, I'm cleaning everything out, and I've got this box of letters that you sent to us." And she'd saved every letter that I had written, starting from when I was traveling until I was living in Thailand, and all my way through my early training and living in Thailand up until I probably till I moved to America, and just it was easier to phone. But and I only actually read one letter. I couldn't bear to read other ones. But the letter that I wrote was a I think it was in my second year as a monk, and I was explaining to my parents and my family that Ajahn Chah has this 5-year plan. I hadn't told them yet that Ajahn Chah has this 5-year plan where you got to stick it out for 5 years and not go anywhere, commit to training. And I said, so I'm definitely going to be committing to that that period of time and training, and that and the main reason is because I've just drawing close to Ajahn Chah, seeing his example, and realizing that if just living close to him and doing the training, I could be on the direction or in the mode and pick up some of Ajahn Chah's peace and clarity and stability and unshakability. Just one of the things that he just seems so unshakable in the midst of dealing with the human condition, and I wanted that. I wanted to be more like that, so that it really did that was what inspired me, was his example. Anyway, here's the I'll begin with these remaining questions. When Luang Por Chah's physical condition was found deteriorating and not physically active anymore, how did the Sangha and lay community react to it? And yourself, how did you feel about it? Also, how did the Sangha manage to find ways to organize a new leadership? Any challenges, confusions, conflicts? Oh, tons of challenges, confusion, and conflict. I mean, that was to be expected. But anyway, yeah, when his, despite the fact that Ajahn Chah, very much a part of his teaching was everything's impermanent, everything's uncertain, everything is changing. And especially this physical body, and he was also quite forthcoming about his own. I mean, he could recognize the deterioration that was happening, and he was quite and there was a particular period where it was unraveling fairly quickly, and he actually said to us as a sangha that this is not a medical condition that the doctors can cure. This is a karmic condition, and I'm going to continue to deteriorate, and I'm not going to be able to help myself. You are going to have to help look after me for some time. And he said for some time was, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be 10 years, which is what it ended up being. But he was pretty clear in letting us know what that was, and that we would need to rise up as a sangha. And also that's something that Ajahn Chah, in his method of leadership, he really tried to include people and not just keep all of the decisions and power to himself or make himself the sole leader. He would do a lot of delegation and consulting, so that and he placed a tremendous emphasis on sangha as the people who would help to make major decisions. I remember one time when it was a group of military generals who actually, one of them became the prime minister a couple years later. They had faith in Ajahn Chah, and they it wasn't. But what they also had faith in was, or what they wanted, and what they did was they made a bunch of medallions, thinking that, and they thought of a strategy, knowing that Ajahn Chah didn't do this type of thing, even though it was something that was fairly common in Thai custom and tradition. And he said they knew that really there was a large sangha at Wat Pah Pong, and sometimes there was enough food, and sometimes there wasn't enough food. And their plan to convince Ajahn Chah was, if you give permission, we'd like to offer these medallions, and it was like several boxes of them, and you could bless them, and then they could be the people can make offerings for them, and the offerings that come from that could be made into a kitchen fund, and then the sangha could be looked after, and everybody will be happy, especially then. But Ajahn Chah was pretty cagey, and he said, "Oh, this is it's not appropriate for me to make a decision on my own. I need to consult with the sangha. We're going to be having a sangha meeting such and such a time. Please come then." And I remember it was at after the Patimokkha, and then all of these medallions were brought in, and these generals and military people came in as a kind of a group, kind of, confident and smiling and I would say even swaggering a bit. And Ajahn Chah explained what their intention was, and he said it in a very nice, even way. And then he asked the senior. There was all sorts of the senior. I can't remember. It might have been Magha Puja or something. When all of because those were the days when Magha Puja was the time when all of the different branch monasteries gathered at Wat Pah Pong, and he so all of the senior elders and disciples and heads of the branch monasteries were at Wat Pah Pong for Patimokkha together, and anyway, he explained it and said, "And what's this should be a Sangha decision rather than a personal decision. What's the Sangha's decision? John, what do you think?" It's Luang Por Chah, and Luang Por Chah said, "I think it's a terrible idea." and then it sort of asked all the rest of the senior monks. You could just see the sort of all the air going out of these generals, sort of being and getting deflated very quickly, and so then, and that was how Ajahn Chah dealt with it, relying on the Sangha, knowing that this is what he's been doing all this time, and he needed some backup and some help from the Sangha rather than it being a personal thing. So those medallions were sort of confiscated and kept, and they were actually where they are now is in Luang Por, because that wasn't the only time that that happened. And there's others that similar situations. And when after Ajahn Chah's cremation and then the enshrining of Ajahn Chah's relics, the decision was to not distribute the relics of Ajahn Chah, but we kept a display which are in the middle part of the jetty that's on top. There's like the big jetty outside, and then there's a small jetty inside, and then there's a crystal bit, and there you can see those relics that are inside. We had, but all the rest of the relics were put into a little crypt in the central part, because we built this little jetty, and because that was the spot where Ajahn Chah was cremated, and so we dug a pit and put in, and then all of those medallions were put in there along with all sorts of other valuables that people offered. It was incredibly inspiring. It was the year after the cremation, and people were coming with gold and jewelry, and people were taking their jewelry off as they're wearing it and putting it in. And somebody came with a whole tray of golden bracelets and give to the monastics to throw into this pot, and then it was covered over, and then the jetty was put on top. So that's Ajahn Chah really included Sangha, and then with his when he was not physically, he was deteriorating very quickly. Then we I mean, of course, there was a tremendous amount of grief, and certainly that's what I felt as well. But tremendous amount of grief, and sometimes people. I mean, I was asked not that long ago, "Oh, when Ajahn Chah died, did you feel a lot of grief?" And I said, "No." And people were taken aback. Why not? Says, I did my grieving when he was still alive and was sick, and there's this slow separation, so that when he did pass away, then that I felt ready for that, and I think that happened with probably a vast majority of the others. That certainty of separation was there because he wasn't. It was obvious he was not going to get better, and so that we could do our grieving then. And of course, grief affects people in different ways, so that it's not everybody. Whether Sangha or lay reacted to it skillfully. There were certainly those who, say, left the community. Wat Pah Pong was pretty small community for quite a while. In those first several years, 4, 5, 6 years after Ajahn Chah first got really ill, and I mean nowadays Ajahn Luang Por Liam is incredibly respected and accepted, but at that point in time when Ajahn Chah was first ill, Luang Por Liam was sort of like, he's not Ajahn Chah. Everybody was grumbling and complaining. He's not doing it like Ajahn Chah. And of course he's not. He's Luang Por Liam. So there were many who were disaffected and left or went off to branch monasteries to be in the orbit still, but one of the things that held the Sangha together really and built the Sangha that we still say reap the fruits of today is because of Ajahn Chah's need to be looked after. Then at Wat Pah Pong we set up a system of nursing Ajahn Chah, and so that there was always 4 monks and a novice looking after him in the daytime, 4 monks and a novice looking after him at night, and most days there would be a nurse, a male nurse from the local government hospital, who was the Ajahn Chah became very quickly became he was already a patient of the Queen's, so he got there was a team coming out from the hospital every single day to check on Ajahn Chah and to provide any medicines and treatment that were needed, and then of course the Mechis at Wat Pah Pong took over the looking after all the kind of the food and diet and whatnot, so that everybody was involved in his care, and also very quickly people came forward and helped to build a hospital kuti for him, and so we used that all the way through up until he passed away. But then, and every 2 weeks, they would change the the shifts of people anybody had the opportunity to come from the branch monasteries and volunteer to help look after Ajahn Chah, and there'd be a lineup really, and it kept they always had one very experienced monk as kind of like the head nurse attendant or head attendant, another monk who would be quite experienced, and then it could have two who were not experienced and could help out and plug in and learn how to look after Ajahn Chah. So that there was this constant rota for taking care of Ajahn Chah. And of course the branch monasteries, sometimes the senior monks would be there. Yes, most often it was more junior monks. But say Ajahn Yanarato, you did many of shifts looking after Ajahn Chah. Just one. I am surprised. But yeah, certainly there was always, and his care was, there was a lot of attention put on his care, so that he was bedridden for 10 years, basically 10 years that he was bedridden, and he never had a bed sore. Just that level of attention was really quite exceptional. So it really helped to draw the Sangha together, and so the people really rose to the occasion, and I think that really helped to cement the, because that really Ajahn Chah's legacy is Sangha, is community, and so that was that period of time of looking after him was quite a natural time to to start to see so like, because the question, how did the Sangha manage to find a way to organize a new leadership? It was an organic process of people. You realize different monks step up, and different leaders start to manifest, and a certain confidence is kind of grows, and others will shrink back. So, because some it was just too intimidating to look after Ajahn Chah, or just didn't put the effort in to do it. So the different people rose to the occasion. Other people fell away. So it was quite a natural time for leadership to grow and communication to start to develop in the Sangha. So of course there were a whole variety of challenges, and it was because of the real need to look after Ajahn Chah, then there wasn't a whole lot of confusion. There was certainly some conflicts, but personally, people were always willing to set aside their personal conflict to look after Ajahn Chah and look after Wat Pah Pong. So that and doing that for 8, 9, 10 years, then that there was a continuity, and again where this then Ajahn Chah's legacy being Sangha, and legacy being his teaching and commitment to teaching and training, so that when as it was becoming, very obvious, he's not, because there was a certain amount of denial, our hope that he would somehow magically recuperate, but as people more and more accepted the reality that that was not going to be the case, then we could start to get our minds around preparing for his passing, and and that's when we started to do these kind of mini practice sessions, on special days, so that we get used to having gatherings of people and having to do that. And when we first floated the idea of getting ready to, making real preparation, there was a fair bit of resistance, but then what we did was, because for, say, myself and Luang Por Liam were we because we were the closest to what was actually happening on the ground with Luang Por and looking at the place, and then it was obvious that Wat Pah Pong at that point was not ready to host an event like Ajahn Chah's cremation. It just didn't have the infrastructure to, and so, but it is a touchy thing for because if you start doing too much preparation, and there's this superstition that you're hastening his death, and so there was some resistance. So what we did was invited. We took about 10 abbots of the senior disciples of Ajahn Chah, and that had a strong voice in the community. We went up and attended one of the cremations of the Lumpu Man disciples, and we got there, and lots and lots of people, minimal organization, maximum chaos, and it was a perfect way to sort of say, we've got to do it differently than this. And so then we got a clear, like a green light to really start preparation. Many of the elders did balk when we started drawing up plans for the cremation pyre, and we had to stop because there was so much resistance, most amongst the lay people, but for, say, Luang Por Liam and myself and Ajahn Naik, Luang Por Chah, this was the most practical thing: get as much done as possible ahead of time. But that we couldn't do. So when Luang Por Chah passed away, we had a year to get everything done. We had, and we had to draw up the plans and build the jetty. That was going to be his cremation pyre. So what you see is that big jetty was a major project that was done very quickly. But I think that sense of just working together to look after Ajahn Chah, that really helped to cement the leadership of Wat Pah Pong, and it also, you started to see who had some skills, who was willing to set aside their personal agendas and really give themselves to helping out. Gosh, that's only the first question. But, I think one of the catalyst was the faith that everybody had in Ajahn Chah and wanting to do right by his by his example, and his life needed a response that was setting aside any personal challenges, confusions, and conflicts, and doing the right thing. Because that is how Ajahn Chah lived his life. I mean, he didn't. That was one of the things that his example was always an example of doing what was and giving himself to what was of benefit to the Dhamma, to the Vinaya, to others. And there was so little personal agenda and personal kind of preferences ever shown for himself. That was his example, inspiring example. Next question. What do you treasure the most among what we inherited from Luang Por Chah? Well, I think just that, in the sense that the example and recollection that if one wants to really reap the fruits from this teaching and training that the Buddha gave us, we have to give ourselves to it, and that was Ajahn Chah's example, and he is such a clear example of somebody who's given himself completely, and he had reaped the fruits completely of the practice, of the training, of the teaching, and just not not a sense of self or self-agenda as a part of it, self-view embedded in that. And so he was, that is, I think what we've inherited is such a clear example of somebody who's reaped the fruits of the practice because they've given themselves to it. And that's something that, one is one grows and flourishes in this Dhamma Vinaya, not because you're getting anything, but because you're giving up. And the more you're willing to give up, the more you'll reap the fruits. What were the criteria for the founding of new branch monasteries at Ajahn Chah's time? Good question. What comes to mind is Ajahn Siripanyo. Most of you probably know him as the head of the Dauda Monastery in Thailand. He's been ordained now comes from a kind of a wealthy family and is father was very upset when his he was getting more and more interested in Buddhism, and then made the decision to ordain. And Ajahn Suripanya's father said, "I can't believe that a son of mine is getting so involved in an organized religion." And Ajahn Suripanya said, "Oh, Dad, you don't need to worry. Buddhism in Thailand is not organized." Which is quite true. So finding a real clear sort of criterion and bullet point agendas for how things got done. It was really depended on the circumstances at the time, and maybe the sincerity of the because sometimes it would come from the initiative of the monks themselves. Say Luang Por Chah wanted to go back to his home village, which is quite ordinary in Thailand. That many of the monasteries are set up in the monks' home village, where they're after maybe years of tudong or training or living with other teachers and going back and establishing a monastery in their home village. And so say that's an example. It's like Luang Por Chah. Luang Por Tiang is similar. His village, I think it was, his village was where the monastery got established. So the early branch monasteries of like branch monastery 1 and 2 were on that was the home village of the monks who were going there. Other monasteries were established on the initiative of the lay people who wanted to offer a place to a practice to Ajahn Chah, or they've had some connection with the community. Say Wat Kun, which was this 1,000-acre wild forest. They wanted to offer more to Ajahn Chah, but Ajahn Chah felt that could only look after 1,000 acres. It was a reservoir. It was a forest that had this power dam, a hydro dam had been built, and then as the water came up in the reservoir, then there was this kind of peninsula of land in the reservoir, and the forestry department was concerned that it was for it to be protected, and they thought if they offered it to Ajahn Chah, he would protect it, which is what has happened. So that it was this beautiful forest that Ajahn Chah felt keen to take on and set up as a monastery that would be of benefit in the future. Some places were lay people that had faith for some reason or other and wanted to have a branch monastery. I mean, think of say Ajahn Anek's monastery. It was a group of lay people who had been going to Wat Pah Pong. They were quite distant, so they couldn't get there regularly. There's an Emperor date. It would be about 60, 70 kilometers away from Wat Pah Pong. And they wanted to offer a piece of land to Ajahn Chah, and there was basically it was just paddy fields. So it was not a forest, it was not nice. It was, but the lay people had faith, and so Ajahn Chah thought, well, we'll give it a try. And the name of the monastery that Ajahn Chah gave it was the Forest Monastery of the Beautiful Banyan Groves. And he said, well, this place is so dismal, we should have a nice name anyway. And so that the monks went to live there, and Ajahn Nanak was one of the early, he was a young monk when he first went, and he wasn't the first abbot. But then they started planting banyan trees and then doing all sorts of reforestation, so that the forest was kind of built from scratch. So the criterion was probably mostly faith and sincerity of either the monk who was going or the lay people that were there. I think of, say, what? Ajahn Mahasupong's monastery, Budindang. That was a lot of relatives of Ajahn Chah. A lot of people from Bangkok had moved out there because land was available. The land was very rich. And so then, so there was a connection between Luang Por Chah's village and that new property. It was in the next province over, close to the Cambodian border. And they really wanted to have a branch that was associated with Wat Pah Pong and Ajahn Chah. And so then Luang Por Mahasupong was willing to take it on. So there was, it was very, certainly in the early years at Ajahn Chah's time, then it would be really more or less Luang Por Chah's. If he supported it, it would probably happen. If he didn't support it, then it wasn't going to happen. So that was the main criterion, was getting Luang Por Chah's support. How did Luang Por Chah cultivate his wisdom, satipanya? How did he generate his energy, his virya? Well, I think one of the things is, as I mentioned, is just his temperament to give himself to what he was doing completely. He didn't really he had prodigious energy. He had a tremendous propensity for putting energy into things, and so I put energy into practice. But he also, I think he had one of the things is really, I think in terms of temperament that gave Ajahn Chah an edge in his early years, and was kind of his a part of his temperament as he got older. Even, you see, his curiosity. He was always curious to reflect, to investigate, to experiment, to try out things, and to see what worked, what didn't work. And so, I think that willingness to experiment, and it's not as if he didn't have doubts. He had lots of doubts, but he always wanted to test them. And so that sense of that willingness to test, to question, to look closely was really a factor in his developing of his wisdom. And I mean, there's in his teaching, he would refer to it in the sense of that having to question like and having to do the practice oneself. Like all the Buddhas can do is point the way. We have to do the practice. The teachings are to be reflected on, and it's also that sense of what we have to do is learn how to teach our minds. And so he was always looking at ways to teach his own mind, and so that it wasn't as if he was just trying to fulfill a formula, fulfill the formula of the Four Noble Truths, fulfill the formula of the Eightfold Path, fulfill the formula of Sila Samadhi. But it was always picked up with a sense of questioning, investigating, applying, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, being willing to adjust and start over. That was all. I think that was very much a part of his temperament, and yeah. How did Ajahn Chah relate to the lay community around him and tailor the Dhamma to their own circumstances? I mean, Ajahn Chah, again, he was somebody who trained people, and of course, the Sangha, the monastic Sangha we received very thorough training. But the lay community were encouraged to be training as lay people and to using the precepts, using the practice as a part of their living a Dhamma life as a committed lay person. And just the fact that the Wat Pah Pong always was a place where the participation of the lay community was always encouraged. So I think number one, Ajahn Chah welcomed and encouraged that engagement, and to a certain degree, really empowered the lay community that this Dhamma and discipline, this Dhamma Vinaya of the Buddhas, was not just something for the monastic community, but that the principles were universal and were realizable by the layperson, and so that was something that was very clearly related. So that the lay community was always encouraged to practice, and so that there was an engagement, and And then there were many ways that he certainly on just on a weekly basis, the lunar observance was a time when the lay community could come and plug in, and they would, you come for you can plug in at any time, but many people would be coming in the morning for offering the morning meal, and then there would be precepts and refuges and precepts would be given. Dhamma talk would be given in the morning. The meal offering would be done, and then lay people had the opportunity to stay at the monastery and practice through the day. In the evening would be evening chanting, meditation, Dhamma talk, and oftentimes Luang Por would just sit and chat with the lay people, be up on the Dhamma seat, and be a time for them to ask questions, or he would give more informal teachings after, and then people would practice meditation and walking, sitting through the night till 4 o'clock in the morning when they do morning puja, and then at dawn, lay people would go back to their homes. So it would be a full day, and people were involved. There's always lots of people. And then also there was ways that Ajahn Chah engaged the lay community in ways that like with the many of the simple building projects would invite the lay people to come and give a hand with certain aspects of it, so that they were involved in different ways. Or like clearing the trails in the forest. Luang Por Chah would get the lay people to come out, and everybody would come. Or doing the say like road around the monastery. It was all done by hand in early days. Same thing at Wat Nana Chat. Got everybody all the lay people involved. So there was a involvement in various ways that the lay people felt a part of the monastery, and I think that's also a hallmark of Ajahn Chah's teaching, is that he could really temper his teaching to the the audience. So he was very skilled at teaching in the local dialect, about to the local farmers and villagers. He could speak comfortably, talk comfortably on Dhamma with the local merchants and civil servants. He could inspire and encourage people who come from Bangkok or the other urban centers in Thailand. He had no problem relating to Westerners. He wasn't intimidated by anybody really, and he was always he would adjust his teaching appropriately to the audience. So he was really skilled at that. He had a real gift, actually. He was a great storyteller. I mean, he really had the gift of the gab. I mean, he could really talk, and people would want to listen. And I remember during Ajahn Chah's mother's funeral preparation, we're at Wat Pah Pong, and 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 we were weaving bamboo kind of baskets of all sorts of different sizes. Ajahn Chah had this vision to make a kind of a mountain with entrances and take these baskets and make them like boulders and had the local community college come out with the students and take paper and then paint it into a. So, and he did. That's how he created the funeral pyre, big area where the Uposatha Hall is now at Wat Pah Pong. That was just flat open land. It hadn't been developed yet, and that was where Ajahn Chah's mother's cremation site was. But anyway, while they're doing this preparation, one of the people who was front and center was Ajahn Chah's older brother, and Paula, and he was so much like Ajahn Chah. I mean, physically he looked like Ajahn Chah, maybe a bit bigger, but same kind of engaging and talking as, oh, this is a family trait. But Ajahn Chah did have that ability to talk and engage with people. And Paula was a headman of the village and close to Wat Kua. Is there a story about when Ajahn Chah wanted to give feedback to a senior monk and he waited 20 or 30 years? I don't know of that, or I can't think of an occasion like that. There's lots of stories about Ajahn Chah for sure, but certainly Ajahn Chah would be very careful about giving feedback. Whether it's 20 or 30 years, I don't know, but he would tend to be, and he would be, I mean, it would depend really, because sometimes he could be incredibly quick, and other times he'd be very cautious. It really depends on the personality and the situation. I mean, there was one monk who really needed feedback, and Ajahn Chah went to his monastery, and he the monk was so upset and angry, even without Ajahn Chah saying anything, and Ajahn Chah didn't say anything. This was too. He said, "This is not going to bear fruit." So it was I think he was good at giving feedback, but he was also very skillful, and he was also he was cautious. He didn't like to. I mean, it's a very Thai cultural trait. You don't confront people head on. Say not like in the West. You really you wait for the appropriate time. You wait for the situation. You do it in a way that is more easily digestible. And I remember him saying, if you have to give feedback to your fellow monks, and you be very careful when you do it. Do not give feedback before the meal. That's usually a really bad scenario. Good way to get your head bit off. Were there any memories from the period of training with Ajahn Chah that really stand out in your mind? In what ways did you find it difficult? Well, there's many ways I found it difficult. I mean, that was, even if I was inspired, it was still difficult. The training with Ajahn Chah, there were, certainly just keeping the routine was really important to Ajahn Chah. Like I was fairly new at Wat Pah Pong. This is after not my first visit when I first met him, but when I came back to really train with Ajahn Chah, and I had been at a meditation center where I was doing a lot of meditation. I was enjoying the meditation, and then going to Wat Pah Pong. There was the meditation. There's always monks sort of coming in at various intervals to come into the morning meditation at 3, and then at 4 you do the chanting, and then of course the chanting I didn't understand, and I didn't see the value in it at that point, and so then I said, well, I'm getting up at 3 and meditating at my kuti till dawn, and so I'm doing the practice, so I just won't bother with that. So then I was practicing at my kuti, quite enjoying it, and in those days, Ajahn Chah wasn't going to the pujas. He had a pretty full schedule with visitors and receiving monastics and lay people. So he wasn't going. So then, but then one day he did show up at morning puja, and I heard about it at Pindabat, and he said, "Where's that new monk, Pasanno?" And the monk said, he hasn't been coming. He's lazy. So that got back to me that I was a lazy monk. And he's I didn't want to be labeled a lazy monk. So okay, I got to go to pujas. Something, various things sort of stand out. I mean, there's all sorts of things, but one of the things that stand out was there was a cremation at Wat Pah Pong, and that was my first time I'd seen. Well, actually, not the first time, but one of the only times in my life I'd seen a cremation, and then the body had been wrapped in cloth, and then just before the cremation itself, they unwrapped the cloth. It was just like village cloth. And then sitting through the night sitting through the night during this cremation, and just seeing the whole process of something that was a human body turning into ash, and then the cloth that was wrapping a corpse was in. Many of us were able to get enough to make it I made a bathing cloth out of it, and boy, I had to wash it and boil it and wash it and boil it about 6 or 8, 10 times to get the smell out. But so it was very meaningful. But that's say that period of training with Ajahn Chah and contemplation of death, contemplation. It was just very natural, and being at just an open fire cremation out at the front of the monastery. And then also just I remember that, one of the things that really sticks in my mind is the I went there coming from a different monastery, so that I had not been keeping Vinaya as well as I hadn't received any training as the standard at Wat Pah Pong. So it was very ordinary at Ajahn Chah's monastery, that if you come from a different monastery and you haven't had the training from the say Ajahn Chah teachers, and that you would stay as a visiting monk, and then see if you wanted to train at Wat Pah Pong, take on that standard of training, and if Wat Pah Pong Ajahn Chah wanted to actually accept you as a kind of full member of the community. So after living at Wat Pah Pong as a visiting monk, Akanduka monk, for I don't know, several months, then Ajahn Chah said, are you ready to commit to this training? Of course, I said yes, of course. And then I was able to get new robes and a new bowl and just requisites that were definitely not bought by money, not used, looked after by money that a monk had used. So then, and it was just before the Patimokkha day, so I was really excited, because you as a visiting monk, you don't join the Patimokkha. You're outside, and you come in after and declare your purity. So I was really excited, because I was going to be able to join the Patimokkha like the big guys. And it's like the grown-up sort of thing. Okay, finally. And so the bell goes for the I can't, maybe 6:30 or something. The bell goes for 6 or 6:30, and I got there. So I'm really keen to hear the bell. I'm going to get there, do my confession of my offenses, go in, sit in it's in the old sala, which they used as the Patimokkha hall at that time, and so sit and wait for the Patimokkha to start. Usually I think it would start at the bell went at 6, it probably started at 7. And so anyway, sitting. And Ajahn Chah didn't show up. Then we heard about 8 o'clock that he was over in the nun section giving instruction to the mechis and would be over shortly. So he made it. He came about 8:30 and been sitting all that time. So then, okay, we're going to do the Patimokkha. And so then Patimokkha starts and it probably wraps up about 9:30 or so, the chanting of the Patimokkha, and so I've been sitting by my standards, especially in those days, to sit more than a half an hour on the floor was a big deal. An hour or so, 2 hours. 2 hours was definitely my limit. So it'd already been over 2 hours. And then Ajahn Chah starts talking. And he started talking, and was talking and giving instruction and talking. And it was midnight, and he was still talking, and it was finally it was after 3, and he innocently looks over at everybody's been looking at this clock on the wall for all and so he innocently looks over. Oh, it's after 3. Somebody ring the bell for morning puja. So that was my introduction to Patimokkha at Wat Pah Pong. It was torturous. So that's a memory that definitely sticks in the mind. But he could do that sometimes. He just I think that was one of the things that he was. It was an act of incredible kindness and compassion to be able to thwart your desires and your preferences, and be willing to do that, and do it in a way that was quite skillful. So that because sometimes you just see him because you had to wait for the bell to ring before you would say start the meal. And, sometimes he'd be fussing away at the top of the line there, or start talking to somebody, and everybody's waiting for that bell to go. And he's it's not happening. He's, are you watching your mind? He's not saying that, but that's the, and to have that gift of saying, if I just let go, I'm not going to suffer. It can happen, the meal can happen whenever, the meeting can finish whenever. If I just let go, I don't have any suffering. But as long as I keep resenting or speculating or proliferating, I'm going to keep suffering. So it became so clear, just so in your face. So that was just an incredible gift. So those are a variety of memories of Ajahn Chah. So I'll offer that for reflection this evening.